Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going through my AFL Fantasy Round 20 team review in what was a pretty positive round for me, ending up scoring the 2490, a round rank of 1851. Yes, 1,851, and an overall rank of 10,559, going up roughly, what's that, 1,800 spots on the dot? Yeah, 1,800 spots on the dot, a clean 1,800 up to 10,559. So maybe we can crack the top 10k if we have another good round. But anyway, let's jump into this video. So the backline actually performed pretty well, all things considered. Zorko is definitely a guy that I'm really looking at now because he's got that Liz Frank injury, and looking at, is there a way in which I can maneuver him around and get him out of the side? I've looked at ways with like a Tom McCarthy to maneuver him on, etc., alongside a Dane Zorko, but it could just be maybe even just a Dane Zorko to someone in the backline. Like if we look at defenders here and just look at their last round for reference, you've got potentially Dane Zorko straight to like a Max Holmes and just fixing that up, because Tom McCarthy's not exactly burning us points and he's still making cash. But we can get rid of a Zach Johnson, say, and push him and push Dane Zorko to the likes of a Max Holmes, or we can potentially even look at a Sicily, who I'm not exactly 100% on either. But yeah, someone looking at that. To get rid of a Dane Zorko, because I think Dane Zorko is pretty much shot at this point, from going these sort of 130, 140 scores that he was going in the past, because he's probably going to be playing through that injury for the rest of this season. And we don't want that, because that could be burning 30 points. Let's be realistic. He's probably going to be scoring, averaging 85 or so for the rest of the year, whereas Max Holmes in those last 4 weeks, with the way he's running on the ground at the moment, he's averaging 105 or so. He's putting 20 points on per week on Dane Zorko. 20 points, that's another 80 points that he could potentially put on, if not more, with the way Dane Zorko is hobbling around. There's potential for him to put on more. And there's also a potential for me just to get a midfielder who potentially does even better than Dane Zorko, because I can pull the likes of a Jack Sinclair back into the back line there as well. Anyway, Wayne Malira, he's an absolute star. Will be a defender mid next year, you would expect, and so we're going to get him as a D1 next year. Yes, he'll be pricey, being probably going to end up the most expensive player in the game. I'm just trying to think who's probably more expensive, not Connor Rozee, who's actually averaging 5-round average or so, who's actually averaging more than him. I can't really think of it off the top of my head. It's probably a Gorn or someone of that regard, who's still maybe just over. Nope, I can't even think of who's over the top of him in terms of average. It is still Bailey Smith by a considerable margin at the moment, by about 4 points per game. But with the way Wangadi Malira is playing, he is probably going to close that gap relatively quickly. So yeah, he is just on fire, and we get him next year. So that is a great thing for us to have. And then we get Connor Rozee, 95. He just did his job. He still is slightly hampered with that hand injury, but we expect him back to his best soon enough. So that's still good. Harry Sheezel, he's been up, down, and around this year, but a 105. And you'd expect him to start. He's really started in the last couple of weeks to pick up that consistency again. He got tagged, it felt like, if from memory, in that Hawks game. So that 65 was a little bit annoying, but he's still been pretty consistent this year. We just really wanted to see that next step, and he's kind of had to weather the playing as a midfield forward type of role, whereas we really need to see him on ball, because when he's on ball, he still does able to rack up that sort of 25 plus. Alongside, he's getting quite good tackles and marks, which is a good indicator for a decent scorer in the future as well. And then Lockie Whitfield, we decided to bring him in over Ed Richards and the likes of Bailey Dale. And Ed Richards went 98 on 79% time on ground, and Dale, I think, actually had a pretty decent game. Did he? No, he went 69. So we made the right choice. decent choice there. I don't know if there was many others in the last round that went crazy out in the sort of price range we were looking at. You would argue, obviously, Jeremy Cameron, who's been on absolute fire, kicking 16 goals, 2 in the last 2 weeks. He also had a couple of out of bounds or shots that didn't register that he could have easily kicked even more. But I don't think most people would have had him in their sides. And I don't think anyone else really that we were looking at last week went off, to be honest with you. So pretty happy about that, to be honest with you there. And then Mills 94, he's just tracking along nicely. Probably will need to upgrade him soon enough. But in that halfback role, I think he's still going to have a couple of, maybe this Essendon game, he does all right and gets another 90 or 100, and then we potentially move him on. But yeah, he's still tracking along nicely and can be an upgrade target soon to fully flesh out the side. Nick Dacos, 146. He was magnificent, 42 touches and 3 goals. Like, just did it all and didn't even have to lay a tackle. The funny thing is, if he'd laid 4 or 5 tackles there, that's an absolute monster 160 game. But we take it, and then we move on to Bontempelli, who ended up being the VC. And obviously, you're going to take a 146 from him, target the matchup. So we're going to be targeting the Sydney matchup, which will be we'll be targeting the Essendon matchup, which if we just look here, let me just double check that. If we look defense first position, I want to say this Essendon ruck matchup is going to be pretty healthy. In the last 10, it is +10. So Brodie Grundy will be an obvious VC/captaincy, I feel like, in the next little bit. They're actually -5 in the last couple of games. Tim English went 101 and Toby Nankervis somehow went 78. But yeah, we'll see who they name, the likes of Essendon. But they could name Vizentini, which would help, I think, dramatically. But if they name Goldstein, I'm still confident in Brodie Grundy, who went up against Briggs and scored 130. So yeah, pretty confident and either way. But we're going to attack those matchups. Zach Butters, 115. One thing that you'll see about this is just a lot of we avoided outside of Zorko those really poor scores. If you look here, like 80 was 71 from Sarong through a tag was the next lowest. And he ended up, he did really well to get to the 71. Probably should have even got to more, which was a little bit disappointing. 0 marks, it looks like. Yeah, 0 marks. If he'd had 2 or 3 marks there, then that's an 80 odd and it looks a lot better. But yeah, Butters 115, Merritt 115, job done for them. Sydney probably tag Merritt, or to the point that the matchup's going to be that in favour of Sydney that they might not even bother tagging. And Butters has Geelong, who they'll probably run a tag by, which will be a little bit annoying. And then you've got the likes of Jax Sinclair, who has North Melbourne. That'll be a pretty decent matchup anyway. But he went off with a 125. Luke Parker, 106. That was a really good score. And after the 48 last week, glad to have him back with a 106. Just failed last week. And so, yep. He's gone down a little bit in price, I think, since we've grabbed him a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, he should still have a really good run to finish the year, and that should do him in good stead. And then Tom McCarthy, 82. He's sort of been trundling in the mid-80s, well, average for the last 5 weeks. 79 for the last 5, and 74.7 for the last 3. So probably an upgradable guy in the near future. We probably just need to bank a little bit of cash to be able to do that. So it might be the Zorko to Holmes play this week, depending on matchup. And let's just quickly have a squiz at that. If we look at the inside mids, where's Port Adelaide? Port Adelaide are a plus matchup there, and then they're -4.04 for designated kickers. So that's also an interesting matchup there. Who's the designated kicker one? So that is going to be the Swans. And then also who plays Richmond, which I'm pretty sure if we just have a quick look at it, who actually does play Richmond. This week, Richmond play the likes of Gold Coast. So that is maybe that sort of Noble-esque play. And I just want to see how did Doherty go. He went 75, so not really anything lost or gained out of that trading him out compared to holding, well, 24k, etc. But yeah, not the worst outcome there, I'd say. And then on the bench, probably should have traded out Zach Johnson because he did lose 29k and 29k could be a big difference, I would say, in the trade outs. Just gaining cash and realizing cash gen and stuff like that. So probably a trade out this week. Angus Clark is burning cash a little bit, but not as fast as the likes of Zach Johnson. Then we had the likes of Brody Grundy, 130. Royal Marshall, 88. Not the greatest display from him. Would have liked to have seen that sort of in the 100s. But he does come up against North, who have Teakle in the ruck. So I expect a really, really good return on that one from Brody Grundy. And then he has some relatively easy matchups for the rest of the year where we will be targeting those ones there. Obviously, Max Gawn does have the West Coast matchup, which will be rough to watch that. And I'm just trying to think who actually does West Coast have. West Coast have Sydney in the last round. And then you've got Essendon, who do Essendon have in the last round. They've got Carlton. Not really a ruck matchup that you want to look at there. So, yeah. That's we probably will stick with these two for the end of the year. Maybe flick across to someone else like an Inglis or something like that, because he does have the West Coast Eagles. But we'll just see how that goes, because Royal Marshall also has Essendon that week where he could just towel it up. Bailey Smith, 132. He's been fantastic. Obviously went through a little bit of a rough patch, but back to his best on the weekend, and has Port Adelaide, Essendon, and Sydney, Richmond. So he has 3 rather easy matchups, and then Sydney, whatever turns up on that day, to be honest with you, probably runs riot against them. Jack McRae, 94, back to somewhat of his best, 96 for the year. Yeah, he's sort of been on an all right hold, but not the greatest. But yeah, just in the end, a 94 is all right for a forward. It's still relatively top of the line if we just go to forward line here. Quite a few actually tall forwards and stuff like that went off, but not many people have these guys. So if we actually look at guys that probably beat him out realistically, you got Dylan Moore, you got Graham Myers, you got Luke Jackson, basically, and that's probably about it. Maybe some would have the likes of Dan Curtin, who's done really well the last couple of weeks. 12% owned still. But yeah, not many are beating out Jack McRae. Matthew Kennedy with a 101 was really, really good as well. Petrarca, 84, probably potentially time to move him on if I could find the right combination. Maybe it is, but I don't really want to go. The problem with going like a Petrarca is like I don't really want to go a Petrarca to like a Jezza Cameron, and there isn't many other guys that I back going large. Whereas Petrarca has the Eagles as well. So you probably want to hold off for that matchup. But maybe next week or something, when he comes up against some rougher sides, we might decide to move him on just quietly. Darcy with the 117 comes up against the GWS Giants. So not a great matchup this week. But the 117, you obviously take 6 goals against there. And then Teakle, 81, moving on the cash gen there. 62k this week. And we're projected like 60 or so k next week. And then we move him on at like 570k or so. Hopefully, maybe even a little bit more. And then that'll be that. And that'll be some really good cash gen from him. But anyway, that is the video there. Rather quick with these updates, I would say. Probably, as I said, looking at the Zorko to Holmes, and then probably just some one of these rookies who's fully cashed out to a just honestly almost a dead rookie at this point. But because there's barely any rookies that are actually scoring well, maybe move him to like a Totoli for fun or something, because Totoli should be getting a debut for Sydney this week. But anyway, that is the video there. If you guys did enjoy it, remember to like and subscribe, turn the notification bell on so you know when I upload, and I will see you guys back here for the trade targets video tomorrow night. Bye guys.